Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. This is Bill Kennedy, and our special guest today from somewhere outside of San Francisco is Kris Nóva. Kris, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super stoked to be here and get to see you again.
Yeah, oh my goodness. I think the last time we saw each other was Italy.
That sounds right. I think so. Well, yeah, because
Uh,
we were in Florence together.
yeah, at the GoLab conference. I think that was the last time. And so much has happened since then. And we've met a whole handful of times over the years, but I know, at least for me, I've never actually gotten to hear or at least a good part of your story and how you got into tech. And I know you've done some really wild lower level things over the years as well. I remember having conversations with you being blown away, like, oh my God, that's, wow, I can't believe it's cool stuff. So, but as you know, the show kind of starts a little bit from the beginning to get a kind of sense of how you got into tech and your first experiences with it, and we flow that way. So, my favorite question to ask everybody: what is one of the very first memories you have, working on a computer?
The first memories I have working on a computer. I have like memories that are very like boring, but I have one memory in particular that I've told a few people about that I think this summarizes me better than any other story that I have. Um, I want to say I was 11 or 12 years old. So, I mean, years and years ago, my family had like gone out and gotten like the Windows PC. I think it was Windows 95. And we had like a DOS computer that I used to play on, but it wasn't anything I didn't really get into it, if that makes sense. Windows was kind of the first like, oh, I'm actually going to go do this in my free time instead of playing outside. And long story short, over the course of a summer, I completely destroyed that computer. If you can imagine, between telnet insecurity, applications from the internet, dial up, like if there was malware in existence, it was on that computer, I assure you.
By accident, obviously, right? Because you're just
Yeah, and like imagine baby Nova, super naive, like, oh yeah, somebody online said download this thing and it'll work, and like, there I was, and I downloaded it, and then kind of like a proper 12-year-old, forgot all about it and never looked at it again. And so yeah, finally the computer just quit working. It got slow. I mean, classic Windows 95 death, and I got grounded for it.
wow.
Yeah, because I broke the family computer. It was like the family car. Like parents used this for important adult paperwork and taxes and all these things that a child didn't understand. And I broke it, and they couldn't. There was some important something on there that I couldn't even remember what it was, but they couldn't get to it. And so they tasked me with, if you can fix it, you can be ungrounded, and we'll unground you. And so my solution to fixing it was installing Linux, and then that later led to a lifetime of there's no Linux allowed in our house, young lady. That's like against the rules, and that's not proper. And so from a young age, I was shamed against using Linux to solve a technical problem, and I think ever since then I've been working on it out of spite.
Okay, wait. You got to help me out a little bit because you're 11, 12 years old. Would you
Yeah.
share with me what year we're talking here with Windows 95? When was that? Is that like 90? I guess it's 95, right?
Yeah, I think it might have been pre-Windows 95. So I was born in 87. It was just before my family had moved. So I think I was 11 years old. So however that arithmetic works out. And so yeah, but it probably was maybe Windows 95. I think I remember Windows 98. I'm like trying to like go back in my mind and imagine myself sitting in my parents' study, like playing on this computer. Yeah, I mean it was talking to my friends. It was IRC. It was downloading like videos and songs and people sending me files, and it was just very like the Wild West of the web, if that makes sense.
What I was hearing is your parents had important documents on this computer they were working on, which at that point was going to get lost. So were you able to like back that up, and then you thought, let me get rid of Windows because this is causing me my pain, and you put Linux on it?
Absolutely. So I mean, the paradigm of a personal computer was different back then. It's not what we think of now when, everybody has like a phone that they can just pick up and they have a computer in their hand. This was, like I said, the family car, and, parents put paperwork and emails and probably work related items on the family computer, and it was expected that's where it lived and that's where it would stay, and nobody really understood what an operating system was or what a volume was. And so like my research and going to the library and reading books led me to like, oh, you can use this thing called Linux to like plug in a CD and boot it up, and then you can like access all this information that you otherwise wouldn't be able to access. So I restored, there was a directory, I think it was like C:\documents or whatever, and was able to recover that for the family. But ended up installing Linux accidentally and just wiping out the entire thing after I had recovered their documents. So yeah, it was. And then, of course, the computer worked fine for me. I loved it. I loved Linux, right? It had everything I wanted and everything I needed. It worked. It was simple, and it looked cool. It felt cool.
But I, as your parent, would have still wanted to strangle you because I want Windows back. That's what I'm used to working with, right? Or were they okay with the Linux and you started teaching them how to use it?
No, so this is when I'm gonna swear here, but this is when shit hit the fan, right? Like, so yeah, like my parents were like, we can get into that later, but they were very old fashioned in their mindset. So something that they didn't understand to them automatically meant danger. And so like not being able to talk to the IT person at work because they're not running Windows, not understanding what an operating system was, not understanding that this is okay. Of course, as a child, my pitch was, it's free, it's open source, it's wonderful, all these people use it, you should totally trust it, it's great. And to them, that was hackers, that was scary, that was untrusted, it wasn't a company, there was no corporation behind it. And yeah, and so that is kind of what led down to the ultimately me getting kind of double grounded, and there's no open source software allowed in our house, young lady.
God, there's so many questions here. Were your parents technical then at the time, or are they just more business oriented? Because it sounds like they're making technical decisions here.
Oh my gosh, I think this is like the perfect metaphor for like as a child I learned more about my career as a 12-year-old than I have in the past decade of my career. I learned at a young age that computers are fun and I love computers, but the people who make decisions about computers know nothing about them. And the people who make decisions about computers look at a computer as a tool, right? Like this is like a lawnmower. It has a job. It cuts the grass. We keep it in the garage. We put gas and oil in it, and then we take it out on the weekends and we cut the grass with it. And that's what it does, and it stays there. For me, computers were like, it was a game, it was a toy, it was a lifestyle, it was a way of thinking, it was a way of living, it was so much more than just a tool that you kept in the garage, if that makes sense.
No, actually I think it's a brilliant metaphor there, because you're absolutely right. And you see that with a lot of things, but I think you're absolutely right there. So now you're double grounded, right? Which means what? How do you get out of this now? You got to put Windows back on the machine. Like, what do you do? What's next?
Right, this explains so much of my trauma in my career. Like, so yeah. I mean, ultimately, what ended up happening was, the summer had come and gone. Grounded in my family was, yeah. I mean, we can get into that stuff later, but, I don't remember very much, but what I do remember is ultimately another computer was set up next to the Linux computer. And I think this whole kind of thing happened long enough that we saw kind of that first cycle, that first really slow turnover in tech. Like now we look at tech and wait 6 months and everything's outdated. You need a new iPhone, there's a new gadget, your computer needs a new operating system, it moves quick. And but that first iteration of let's say 1994 to 1998, I mean, that took time. That was slow. And then everybody got pissed off for the first time in their life at computers after that. And we kind of learned growing up that you're going to get pissed off time and time again with computers. And that was the first one for me and for everyone in the world. And so looking at, the second computer showed up in the house, and again, we're looking at it as a tool, and this is the good one. Don't touch it. This is mom and dad's, and this is the bad one that, this is for you and all your open source crap that you and your buddies can go and do, right? And that was kind of the way things went. And so that became my Linux computer for probably the first 5 or 6 years after that. I think I even had it going into high school.
But it sounds like it ended up being a big win for you because you ended up now with your own computer at the end of it that you didn't have to really share, and
Yeah.
you could go off and do the things you wanted to do with it. So it sounds like at the end of the day, it was a win.
I think so. I think it was a win. Anecdotes that I remember was like I remember the first day I got to move my computer into my bedroom. Like that was like, oh my gosh! Like it now officially became mine, and like that was symbolic of unscrew the whole thing, take it apart, rebuild it, set up an area for it, and like it was like getting Legos. Like it was my first time to really get to play with a computer, and of course it was kind of done out of like get it out of our way. We don't want to deal with it anymore. Go put it in your room, kind of thing. And the other thing about it was, I actually was. I mean, I sacrificed a lot. Like normal kids are outside playing sports and making friends and going on dates, and I was inside sitting on IRC with my friends, most of which I had never even met at that point, and who knows how creepy that was. But I remember going to middle school and high school and being like, oh yeah, I run Linux, and thinking that I was going to get made fun of for that because I didn't have a PC and everybody was doing all these cool PC things because all the kids had fancy computers. And I remember a lot of the older kids were like, she's cool, she's with us, she's a nerd, like let her into the Dungeons and Dragons group. So right away I was like escalated to the tippy top of the nerd spectrum, and I'm not to brag or anything, but I've been there ever since.
They're not letting you out. And I want to talk about high school because high school is a time where you're taking classes, a lot of them you don't want. You got to start kind of thinking about what life is like after high school. And I'm just kind of curious, are you taking any classes in high school with computers? Is your head already in a place where this is what I want to do for a living? Like, what's going on in high school relates to this tech?
So I mean, we can get into some of the more personal side of this. I'm fine with it, but high school was hard for me for a lot of reasons. My family moved. My parents, like, if I met parents who behaved and made some of the choices my parents made, I would not be friends with those people. I would not look at them as admirable people. And that's just whatever. But high school was hard because that's when puberty happened. So the endocrine system, hormones, being transgender, living in Texas, being a nerd, being a pre-trans nerd Linux user in Texas in the late 90s, like holy shit, like you couldn't ask for a more insane environment. Wow. Yeah, and going to football practice and doing that whole like Texas thing was rough. Yeah, I think high school and computers were always the easy tool for me. Like I always kind of had this card in my back pocket that I could play. Like, yeah, I could make decent grades, or I could go get a job, or I could do whatever I needed to do to kind of be successful. But I always knew in the back of my mind, nobody's going to be able to do more than me on a computer, and nobody's going to be able to hack or build or do anything stronger, faster, or more effective than me. And in high school, we had our first Visual Basic programming class. I think I completed the entire semester's worth of work in the first week and a half. Like, built an entire application, made it do math, built a calculator, and that was like our final project. And then I was already further along than our teacher when I joined the class. And then I just did typing exercises and built a Dvorak keyboard and just did a bunch of like other things and built a website actually. And so that was like, none of that was rewarded. My parents didn't even know any of that happened. That was just like my school experience, and I didn't really even think much about it until I got my first job in college.
Were you playing football because you wanted to play football, or your parents were kind of saying that's what you should be doing and kind of pushing you down that path, which is taking time away from your friends and the computer and those types of things, right?
Yeah, and without getting too much into the childhood experiences here, I'm trying to think how I would say this in polite conversation. If there was a president of the United States we could assimilate to my father, he was just recently in office. And so like very old-fashioned, very conservative mindset. Boys play football, girls stay in the kitchen. Like I'm going to raise you to be a man. We don't show feelings. We don't have emotion. So football was it was a non-option. It was non-negotiable. It was like going to church on Sundays. This is what you do, and if you don't do it, I will beat you within inches of your life, kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And that was very normal for boys growing up in Texas, right?
Yeah. So then I imagine that as you're now a senior in high school, you have this amazing kind of understanding of tech and really deep core tech. You're looking to get out of the house, right? Like university is your next step? Or are you thinking, I know enough to even just get into the workforce at this point? I want to start making money. I want to be on my own.
So we're kind of breezing over a pretty substantial part of my life. I ran away when I was 17. When I graduated high school, I was not living with either of my parents. I was staying with a friend mostly, kind of on the other side of town. He had just graduated high school, and his dad had paid for him to get an apartment for the year. And I was just sleeping on his really, really horrible couch, and that was kind of home base for me. And exactly where I went every night was up in the air. I did kind of come home from time to time, but it wasn't very often, and it was usually just to like get something out of my old space, or get clothes or something. Um, and Yeah, like I remember driving myself to graduation, and them not letting me in because I had been missing so much school, and then like trying to get my high school whatever diploma or whatever from my parents, and like that apparently never came in the mail, and like it was just this whole thing. And so finally I just filed for the general education thing. Um, so anyway, did the whole long hair, play in a band, kind of be homeless, travel around and live out of my car. I lived in a storage shed for a while. That was pretty fun. And then I started to kind of put myself through school, in Springfield, Missouri, of all places, which is where I met some really beautiful people. And yeah, I later got kicked out of college. I was put on academic probation. There's another interesting computer story there about getting caught torrenting some things in one of the cafes on campus. And yeah, and then I got my first job working as a PHP web developer. I think I was making $14 an hour. Um, and yeah, the rest, as they say, is history.
It had to be incredibly difficult for you to be able to focus on your education during that time. Did you have access to the computers at that point, or you were using your friends? Like, I'm kind of curious how you stayed focused on getting that high school education and moving forward and then getting to that first job, especially PHP, because that's really wasn't in your wheelhouse, right? The PHP at that point, or was it?
PHP was the first Turing complete programming language I learned well, right? Like I was writing my first Apache PHP MySQL web applications in high school. I remember like going to I think I still have my PHP 4 book around here somewhere, but I remember going to the library and checking the book out and finding the librarian just giving me the book. And that was like, that was the first time in my life I learned what a function was, and like wrote in, oh, I can build these little building blocks and use them for things over and over again.
And what were you building? Personal websites? Were you building websites for others? Was it for your band? Like, I'm kind of curious.
All of the above, anything I could really. I did music festivals. I did my band. I did myself. I had like journal. Yeah, I mean, I was just constantly building things. I was just automating little chores in my life. And then really the big one that got me in trouble in college was writing PHP and Bash to help me with my homework. We had done online. It was like the first iteration of online schooling, and I was working, putting myself through school, so I was like doing a lot of my homework at night. And they used PHP, and so naturally I started to write these little PHP scripts to iterate on the static text. And I found that it was a lot easier to look for keywords and phrases using grep and search and things like that from the like the blobs of text I was downloading from the website. And then like a good engineer, I got lazy and started automating it, and I would download entire textbooks and save them to disk and grep for things in there. And what normally would be an hour's worth of my time to do homework, I could get a somewhat decent answer for in 15 minutes or something like that. And anyway, my college professors weren't very fond of that approach.
I don't understand that. I mean, there's nothing really wrong with that, right? You found a new way to consume that information quickly and accurately. What were they thinking, that you were plagiarizing or something?
I think it was plagiarism. It was again, we're back to this. I don't understand it, so it seems sneaky to me. And also, like, I didn't learn the skill of advocating for myself, or really, like, none of this had ever been rewarded, right? Like, I didn't ever make a dime in my life doing any of this. This was all like I put this on par with, like, going behind the bleachers and smoking dope or something. Like, this is just something I didn't talk about, and like that parents didn't like, counselors didn't like, coaches didn't like. I mean, this was taboo, right? And so yeah, like, even getting in trouble in college just reinforced this mindset of everything I was doing was wrong or bad, or shouldn't be rewarded. And I kind of just learned at a young age that, like, this was cheating. This was not okay. And so when I did finally get in trouble for I got in trouble for torrenting. I don't want to say too much because we're on a podcast, but I think you can imagine, like, what I was doing. And then, when they discovered I was also scraping websites, they assumed that it was even more illegitimate, when really, like, I wasn't selling it. I wasn't doing anything horrible. I just wanted to find the answer to question 17 faster. That's
Yeah.
really all I wanted to do. And I never even thought that this would be something that they would understand. So I never even tried to explain myself. I just said, oh, okay, yeah, you caught me. I clearly was cheating. I'm out of here.
Wow. And yeah, it would be nice for you now to be able to go back in time and say, this isn't cheating. Get real. This is me being more
Yeah.
efficient with the tools that are out there. But I have to imagine, Kris, that something in the back of your mind also must have said to you that these people are confused, that I know what I'm doing isn't really morally or ethically wrong, and when I'm not cheating. Did you at least keep something like that in the back of your head? Because you didn't, obviously, these people didn't stop you from learning how to automate, learning how to build tooling, learning how to do the things that you were doing that now, today, are celebrated, and we need more of it, right?
Yeah. I don't really even think I learned that until probably my late 20s. I mean, I had a whole tech career before I started a second career, and now I'm back to tech again. I mean, starting out in the working force at 17, right? Like, I was paying rent at 17, working at, like, fast food restaurants on the weekends, and staying up and falling asleep in class the next morning. Um, and Yeah, like, it wasn't really ever celebrated, and I kind of just thought of it as, like, one of, like, I put it like, let's compare it to being trans. It was just a dirty little secret of mine, right? Like, it was just part of this thing that I don't talk about. Parents don't approve of it. Like, yeah, it's weird, it's different. We don't understand it, so therefore we block it out, and we say we don't want it in our lives because we don't understand it. And yeah, that was just a normal part of my life. Like, there were plenty of things like that I did that people didn't understand. So I just kind of said, oh, this is just another one.
Wow.
And yeah, like, it was nice for me. Like, when it was just me all alone in introvert mode in my college dorm, heck yeah, I was gonna write a script and download my textbooks and scrape for keywords and phrases. And I mean, I still remember the first time I learned about case insensitive grep, and dash I, and, like, oh, this changes everything. Like, I can refactor everything, and, like, that was for me only. And I didn't tell anyone about it. No, I didn't. I just thought it was, like, a weird habit of mine that I did when nobody was looking. And now it's like I could reach over to my bookshelf here and, like, hand you a copy of the book that I've written on a lot of this. So it's just like,
Yeah, it's like you had superpowers that nobody could even comprehend at any level. So everybody's afraid of it because you have these superpowers that just let you do mind-blowing things around that time.
so this is one of the reasons I spend so much time working with young folks and people who are more junior in their careers, because I want to help them see this sooner. Because if I would have seen this sooner, I would be in a different place right now. Or maybe not. Maybe I needed to go through this, like, in order to be the person I am today. But regardless, like, yeah, I think you could call it a superpower. I don't. I think it ultimately, if you even zoom back a step further than that, like, it's just about believing in yourself. And that is, I don't think anybody really ever enforced that lesson to me as a kiddo, right? There was never, like, hey, do you really truly believe that you should quit the football team? Yes, and here's why. Like, okay, I trust you. You have my full support. Let's do it. Like on one hand, it's a superpower, and it would have been really nice to not go through some of the pain I went through. But I also don't, like I said, I don't know if I would be where I am today if it wasn't for that.
But it's an environment where everybody's first reaction to everything is no, or just laying out all the negative things that are going to happen without any remote positive possibility of everything. I mean, I grew up a little bit like that. From my mother was very strong, and if you came up to her, it was all, well, here's all the bad things that can happen, and you never get to the positive things that can happen. But you had
Yeah.
you had that times two, almost intense, from everybody who was an adult
Yeah.
figure, right, in your life throughout that. I imagine your friends and your peers were hopefully there to support you. I'm assuming this is from adult figures.
Yeah, most of my peers I like didn't even talk to about this. Most of them had no idea what a computer if they conceptualized any of my usage of computers growing up or in college or high school or anything, it was always Kriss is the person who can help us when our computer breaks. Kriss can install my printer. Kriss can do all this stuff. And yeah, like and that was fine. That's where we left it. Like when I would go do my nerd things in my room, that was special. That was me time. It was like reading a book. It was introvert mode. And yeah, I would say anytime any of that type of behavior, for whatever reason, was brought up in polite conversation with some sort of adult or authority figure, 99% of the time it was, we don't understand this. It must be bad. Don't do it. Stop.
Wow. So tell me about
Yeah.
this first job now. Let's get back to the first job that you get writing PHP professionally. You must have been excited about this job. I mean, you're now a professional software developer. You're getting paid to do the things that you want to be doing there. Talk to me a little bit about, was it a big shop, small shop? What was the problems you were solving there? And then kind of maybe how long you were there as well.
Yeah. So I had taken some odd jobs writing PHP right out of college, where I like helped online e-commerce websites and was working part time. And I would say my first big girl PHP job was I had started out working at a structured cabling company, pulling fiber, polishing fiber, and then we also did security, like physical, like the locks on your doors type of security systems. And we had cameras and we did networking, and we needed someone who understood computers well enough, who also knew the physical part of things, to kind of manage the design and installation of like some of these higher end, more complex uh, deployments that we did, or I'll call them deployments, but installations. So polishing fiber, racking and stacking servers, setting up switches, configuring cameras, building out, IPAM for cameras, like all of this low level sysadmin combo physical layer stuff. And that was working for my dad at the time, and that was just a horrible idea. But I did get an opportunity to learn from some of the other folks in the industry. I remember asking questions to other people, like from other companies, like how did you get, how are you configuring the switch? Oh, you have a CCNA. I should get one of those. And got my CCNA, and then I got my first big girl PHP job. And it was a company out of Denver, Colorado called Tool King, and it was a warehouse that sold tools that wanted to turn itself into an online tool shop. And this was kind of in the days of e-commerce. And then we noticed that a lot of the vendors we purchased tools from sold other things as well. And the more we explored, the more we realized we were just kind of a drop shipping software company, and not like an online tool store anymore. And so what started out as a catalog of a few thousand tools quickly turned into a few 100,000 everything items. And then it was just kind of like a lot of lifting and shifting data, just integrations. How do we connect Amazon to this drop shipper's PO system? How do we connect eBay to Walmart? How do we, and just cross-referencing everything, and writing code and scripts to mutate the data, calculate pricing, and try to resell it at a premium. And that was kind of the model. And it was just this data exchange warehouse. And that was my first startup. We went bankrupt. it was great. I learned I would do that again in a heartbeat. That was the best worst job I've ever had.
What year are we talking? Is this like 2005 maybe? Or is it 10 years?
Oh no, 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 no. This is later. I'm in my 20s
Okay.
at this point. I think I started at 11 and went to 13 or 14, I want to say. Um, and gosh, I feel old. This is like the first time in my life I'm like having to like think of years and oh, it must have been around 2011.
The dates only become important because it helps to frame the tech that you had and the infrastructure that we had. And so you're building this really large e-commerce and basically site in PHP.
Yeah.
You're having to build everything because we don't have the Shopify's yet. The idea of just probably a lot of reusable stuff doesn't exist, right? I mean, you're building foundational code for all of these things because you just don't have the plug and
Oh,
play.
and I loved it. I loved every moment of it. But yeah, everything had to be invented. And what I will say is like just to kind of set like what the world was like, because I have a feeling there's a lot of people watching who were in kind of the tech around the same time. This was in the days of like this was the first job I used a Mac. This was the first time I had heard of a different database other than MySQL, and we used it, and it was in like a very early stage. It was called MongoDB, and yeah.
No sequel at the edge of no sequel. Yeah.
Oh yeah, baby, we were into it, and it was so PHP, so untyped, loosey goosey programming language. This was before, I remember working on the PHP 7 like proposals and stuff like after this job. So I mean, this is in the days of everything is an associative array and just dump it into Mongo and we're having a party, call it a day, right? And so this was like this job, like I said, I was working for my dad before it. So if you can imagine all the bullshit I went, sorry for swearing again, before any of this happened. I mean, it happened all over again when I quit, the family company, right? It was like, oh, she's going off to do tech and software and all of this crap. And like, of course, I was talking about Linux again. It's like I thought we were over this in high school, and yeah, I was like, no, I got my CCNA, and like this is important. I want to do networking and sysadmin and write code, and yeah, and so like again, like this was all like in my mind, I'm still traumatized from all of this. This is all like shit that I shouldn't be doing, right? This is all bad. And so yeah, I didn't tell my friends really what I did for work. I didn't like I wasn't really blogging. I went to work to get a paycheck. I came home and like that was it. I left work at work. So any of the tech t-shirt, go to a conference, go online, none of that.
I see.
I was just, I mean, was pre-trans at this point, so I didn't really even enjoy being myself, especially in public. So why would I do any, so I'm like, maybe I was invited to like a Mongo's master. I can tell you that, Kris Nóva in that year at that job would have just been like, no, I ain't got time, and like just went home.
Yeah. No, okay, yeah, that totally
Yeah.
makes sense. You don't get to where you need to be to sustain the company. So what's your next move, which I'm assuming is around 2013, 2014. What's your next move from this?
So this is where the transition started, really, where I started to have thoughts about who I was and what I wanted to be in my career, because this was the first time in my life I was truly like at this point I was completely outcasted from the family. We've had enough of this Linux crap. We're done. You're on your own now. You left us for a different job, and you're kicked out of the we're taking you out of the will and all this kind of stuff.
Really? Your parents felt like you betrayed them. I'm almost hearing this kind of, you betrayed us and we're ripping our shirt and we don't want to know, right, of you. And
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, totally.
Wow. Now, I'm just curious before you move on. At this point, were you numb to that? Did it still really hurt you?
I don't think anybody can ever be truly numb to that unless they have some sort of something going on in their brain, right? To everybody, to them, to my friends, to people in my life, I looked numb 99% of it, but yeah, it hurt. Heck yeah, it hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was super hard, but how can I put this? I was very used to that. There's a lot of prior art here, so I at least had some tools and techniques to help me kind of navigate through it, and they've just gotten better over the years. Um, and this was just one of the more profound iterations of kind of this abandonment pattern in my life.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was it. And I had tripled my salary by that point, so it made it a lot easier to kind of justify a lot that I was doing.
Yeah, I keep hearing this kind of theme where the adults in your life are constantly saying that you're doing it wrong and you're betraying us and you're not listening. And at the same time, there's a part of you that's going, yeah, that's true because I know what's best for me and I got to follow this path. And even as you're having success, nobody's recognizing it. But thank God you're having some of this success because then I don't get to meet you, right? Because this is
Yeah,
moving you forward. And I'm really glad where tech is today too, because it's really proving, right? 20 years later, it's proving that you were right 20 years ago. Like you
I,
saw this.
I hate to say I told
Yeah,
you so,
I told
but
you so. So tell me now. So that the PHP job's gone. You're now figuring out the next steps, and you're starting to kind of better. You say to evaluate who you are and where you want to be, right?
right. So sticking with PHP, I'm evaluating myself, and so I had worked at this first job for 3 or 4 years, right? And I had gone from, hey, I know how to write a function in PHP to database drivers, building web applications, building HTTP REST. This was in the days of SOAP XML APIs and going from SOAP into REST. And I remember moving from Subversion to Git for the first time, and then GitHub came out, and it was like, whoa, and it was cool and hip, and we had old grumpy engineers who were like, these darn kids with their Git Subversion is fine, and I just like that was my job, and that's kind of what I did. But anyway, fast forward here a little bit through that job, and imagine me now, a couple years into the job, writing unit tests. I can sit down in front of PHP, and even now probably could sit down in front of PHP and just like make it work and walk away and be done. And it took years to get there, and that had given me enough confidence to kind of like make a little slightly more risky moves in my life. And this is where the gender transition really started. So that company went bankrupt for reasons out of my control. And honestly, it was kind of a sketchy business model anyway, but like, whatever. um, but yeah, it was fun. I'd learned to write code in the back of a warehouse in Denver, Colorado. That's pretty sweet. And like, giant empty warehouse with forklifts and like little computers in the corner. Uh, and so started a transition, and I joined up a company. So I started contracting because I knew that my transition was going to be hard. And I had kind of, premeditated some of this. And I just knew that as I went from one gender to the other, short, ephemeral relationships were going to be important. And as I kind of went through and iterated through these ephemeral relationships, maybe I would find one or two people along the way that would actually be like, and I did. And, to this day, there's people that like a couple of folks come to mind. And if they're watching this, like, you know who you are. Hi, I love you. And yeah, and they definitely stuck with me. But that's where the contracting and the gender transition started. And, like my hair used to be like down to here, and I've cut it and grown it and cut it, and I've kind of gone through the whole thing.
Well, I think let me pull you back a little bit then, because I think it was a brilliant move, right? You could take a 2 or 3 month contract, make a bunch of money, and then if you needed a month off for this or that, you could do it. So you found a way, and your skill set was so strong that you found a way to be able to continue to make money, but get the time you needed for all these personal changes that you were making, right? I mean, that's the idea, right? I mean, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, that was the plan. That was the master plan. This took 48 hours of IRC planning with some close friends of mine from the internet to come up with this idea. And then, like most ideas in my life, the second I make up my mind I'm going to do it, like I knock it out of the park. I nail it. And so yeah, this was I'm going to do this. I'm going to go through a gender transition, and it starts right now, not tomorrow, not after breakfast. It starts immediately. And sold the house, moved, took contracting jobs, bought a new car, like lost all my money, made some money, lost all my money, made some money, like went through that whole cycle a couple of times. and then came to California, to San Francisco, where I am right now. And my first day in public as a woman was like 15 minutes up the road in downtown San Francisco.
From the time that you decided that day that I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this personal change in my life, this is what I want, and I'm going to
Yeah.
make a career change in my life to be able to support and fund that. From the time you get into the time that you're in San Francisco and you're like, this is the first time everyone is seeing me the way I've always seen myself. What year are we talking about?
So okay, so let's. I skipped a super important detail here. The company that went bankrupt with the warehouse, I obviously took some time off after that, and I got my first contracting job was at a company in Denver. The company in Denver, their headquarters was in San Francisco, and so that's the connection there. And I started contracting with them, and we're getting more and more recent in my career, so I'm going to be a little more, hesitant about what I say because some of these people are still in business. So that company had an office here in San Francisco, and honestly, I was able to separate my genders geographically. So like when I was in the Denver office, I was Kriss, but when I was in San Francisco, like I was Kriss.
Really?
And yeah, and that was hard.
Weren't you still working with people from Denver?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that had to be hard.
So this is when I started to learn the lesson of advocating for myself. Like, 30 minutes ago, I had said I didn't know about this until later in my life. This is the first time in my life I really learned the importance of this, and how to say things like, I would prefer these pronouns, or I would prefer this name, or I would prefer if you didn't say this or do that or think of me this way. I had never done that in my life. I had never said I would prefer no lettuce on my sandwich, or I would prefer to sit in the front. Like that was such an abstract concept for me that even thinking that I could have an opinion or a preference or that anybody would even care was something that was new for me. And so, yeah, like there was people who I worked with at both, and everybody was different. But what I found out was, there was a lot of power in obscurity. And I like, even at the beginning of this conversation, you're like, where the heck are you? Where are you living these days? Like, and with that obscurity comes a lot of power because people can fill in that space with kind of whatever they want to imagine me as. And I don't really have to go into the implementation detail of like, hey, I'm a trans girl from Texas, right? Like that we can kind of breeze over that and just get on with the rest of the conversation. Like, yeah, that's cool, you're from Texas, but like you still screwed up the last commit. Like that's what I cared about. And so yeah, there was people who like I wore a dress to work one day and they were just kind of like don't really know what to do. And there was never a big email, I just kind of started doing it. And in that space, people just like, I found out very quickly that even though this was my first month of my life doing this, there were just people there who just assumed I had been doing this my whole career. And that this was just a normal thing. Like, this is just, and they just kind of said, whatever, I've heard about this and never seen it before, but like, whatever. Anyway, you still screwed up your last commit. And like, thank you for just being cool with it. So that's kind of how it happened. And it was hard. There, is good of people that I saw that were nice and understanding and didn't care about it. There was also, what's with the Bieber hair, dude? Or like, why are you wearing a dress? Are you gay? Like a lot of those types of tech bro things. And I got them both here in California and back in Colorado. It's just, you never knew what you were going to get. I would say though, I was always surprised. Some people I thought were going to be jerks were really sweet. And some people I thought were going to be sweet were just completely, it was so bad. But yeah.
So we've got like 12 minutes left here, and I want to ask you this question because when you're in San Francisco now, you're making these changes in your life. When do you make a decision to decide that I'm going to start being out there on stage? I'm going to start sharing what I know. I'm going to be someone that's in the maybe public eye or community, because you haven't done that. Right? Like when I ask you if you're a Mongo master, you're like, that never would have happened, Bill, because I'm not putting myself out there just yet. When does that happen?
Bill, like buckle up because you're gonna get the best answer to this that you could imagine. Like this is like the season finale here. Like friends become enemies, enemies become friends. It's all about to come back home with this question. So I took my first job after this. So the warehouse job came and went. The contracting kind of split personality San Francisco Denver job came and went. And I took another contracting role at a company in Boulder called Solid Fire. And this was my first big girl startup. And this was the job where I said, I'm a fucking woman. I don't care what anyone says. And I'm going to go to work every day. And it's she, her, it's woman. It's no exceptions. This is me. And this is how people meet me. And this is what I'm going to do. And if it's hard, I don't care. And I'm going to forgive myself and I'm going to love myself. But like, at the end of the day, I just want to be a dang SRE and I just want to write code and I just want to get paid and have my paycheck and I don't care what people have to say. And I don't want to spoil the surprise, but I'm just going to tell you now, my boss at the time was super beautiful, super understanding, and super supportive. Next Monday, I start a job as a senior principal engineer at Twilio. She's my boss again.
Nice.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Like baby trans Nova gets to have the same boss again. And so she went from the Solid Fire at Boulder. We were bought by NetApp. I went off and did Deas and Kubernetes and Heptio and VMware and Microsoft and everything. And she went over to SendGrid, which is now Twilio. And like she messaged me the other day when I was looking for a job and was like, hey, we're doing this thing. And we started talking and like I took the job. Here we are. And to answer your question concretely, it was with her and with that job at Solid Fire where I started to advocate for myself. And when I found that I actually had something to say and people cared about it, because that was the first time people actually listened to me. That was the first time in an engineering discussion I would say things like, I don't think we should do that. And here's why. And people said, oh, that's really smart. And I said, whoa, like this is not my dirty little secret anymore. This is actually like people care about this. And then here's where we're going to take a walk down memory lane here. I have a bookshelf right here that you guys can't see. So this is the Kris Nóva Microsoft 2017 GopherCon Denver, Colorado. This is my badge. This is my first time to go on stage publicly. I gave a talk about Kubernetes cops. And I still have it framed here. And I remember getting accepted to go speak at the event and going to speak at it. And this was my first time. And it I think it's still to this day is like my most popular talk. It was the first one I ever gave. And looking back on it, I learned a lot.
I had no idea that was your first talk. I don't think anybody would have guessed that.
So this is the thing. This is that lesson that I feel like this is the superpower. If I could tell folks at home one thing, this is the superpower nobody knows that they have. Let there be obscurity, intentional obscurity, because people just assume the best, right? Like if I didn't tell people this was my first talk, they're like, oh, she has such stage presence. She would have been on stage for years. And I was like, that's my dirty secret. Like, this was my first time. And so, yeah, and granted, there are people who don't always assume the best, but, yeah, with that obscurity comes a lot of power, because you're given an authentic chance to just be yourself and be taken at face value, and there's a lot of good that can come out of that. And I learned that with Natalie at Solid Fire. I learned that in my transition. I learned that with a lot of the lessons I learned on how to advocate for myself and how to be myself and just let people give people space to experience me on their own terms.
That's kind of the beginnings of me getting to know you, right? From that distance. Yeah. But when I think of you from that point and all the amazing things you've done since then in terms of the companies you worked on, the tech you've worked on. You've continued to still be cutting edge. You were in Kubernetes really early on. Do you think because at that moment you stepped out on that stage and you said, this is who I am, and you've had a lot of success since then, do you think that success you're having is because you took that one last leap of faith and really put yourself out there?
So everybody's experience is different, right? Like you and me, we live in a different world than a lot of folks, right? Like there are people who don't even have internet right now. And then that's such a foreign, abstract thing for folks like us who are so tapped into this and so embedded into this career. And there are people who have internet and don't care. They just straight up just don't care. They're just like, no, I'm busy. I'm gonna go outside today. And so like, yeah, everybody is in a different experience in a different world at a different time. So I do think it's a little bit of luck. It's the right place. It's the right time. I did get lucky, I think. And but ultimately, like, I jumped, right? Like I gave a whole podcast on this where I just talked about the leap of faith. And yeah, I would do it. I don't care if it was 100 years ago. I would do it again. I would absolutely jump again. And I would encourage other people to do it as well. If there's that tiny voice inside of you saying that it feels right, like imagine little baby Nova, 11 years old, with her glasses and on the family computer doing Linux and getting grounded for it. Like, don't ground that version of yourself. Embrace that version of yourself. That's the beautiful thing, right? Like, and it doesn't matter if it's computers or anything else. You should love that person who is just trying to play and be free
and be themselves, and
yeah,
and at the same time is someone who, in this particular case, tech, has a lot to offer and share and help with the business goals and with what we're trying to do, right? Like, that's first and foremost.
Yep. We're all building lawnmowers here for the garage. That's what we're doing. We're building tools. That's what we're doing.
All right, so in the last 3 minutes kind of that we have, and like we really only get an hour, obviously, and we've taken
Sure.
this one small path. You've worked on things that now others get to appreciate because you were there. I think you had a big play in Kubernetes with Heptio. You've done things that I think people might be using tech, and you had a part of it, right? I think for me that's this great success, and you're there. I'm just curious, where are your parents right now with you? Do they see the Kriss who's really had success and got it right, or are they still kind of in this box that they've been in for the last forever?
I'm going to tell you two things about my parents. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know what they know or what they don't know. But so that's the first thing. And the second thing is, the last thing that I know about them is that they didn't even know my name.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay. I don't, maybe they know of Kris Nóva now and they don't realize that Kris Nóva is the same Kris Nóva. But yeah, that's the last I've heard from them, to say, to put it lightly. And yeah, I've learned to be okay with that. I think I'm okay with that. It's sad, but I think I'm okay with it anymore.
I imagine there's a lot of people out there who are facing some of the same struggles you've faced that we've talked about over the last hour, and need people in their lives like you started to get over the last few years, right? Of that support, and you can do it. And so for other people that are listening here, maybe you could provide them some kind of final words of maybe advice if they're on the same path as you. And then I would love for you to be able to share how maybe someone can reach out to you.
I feel like I write this a lot, in a lot of I just relaunched a new blog, and I mean, I've got weeks and weeks of content out there on the internet people can go and find. The one word I would say is jump. And I've said that before and I'll say it again. And the message I would give, and this is the exact same message I would give tiny baby Nova on her Linux computer, in 1995. I'm proud of you. You're doing okay. You're doing it right. I'm really proud of you. That's exactly what I would say to people. And you need to be able to learn how to say that to yourself. And so, yeah, like, it's taken me years to be able to genuinely feel proud of myself for a lot of that stuff. So that would be the pieces of advice I would say. And then to reach out to me, I have my little spiel here, like Kris@nivenly.com if you want to email me, and pull requests accepted and ignored. So just let me know. But no, in all actuality, like, I'm out there. I send me an email, shoot me on Twitter. I may not be super responsive because I get a lot of these, but I will do my best to help any way I can. And like there's probably 20 or 30 people watching right now who I've worked with who would probably say, yeah, do it. I was afraid to, and I emailed her, and she helped me get a job, or now I've successfully transitioned, and my wife is still with me, or like there's all kinds of good stories like that out there, and most of which have nothing to do with me and everything to do with the person jumping and taking that first leap, and their first leap is just reaching out to someone, and that someone just happens to be me.
Awesome. Amazing. Yeah. You had to go through this at a time where I think there were just too many really uneducated people in everything, right? And now there are people like yourself who've been able to get through this, make that jump, and obviously there's still struggle there, but the opportunity to have access to you and to talk to you could be just, I think, could be brilliant for someone, right? So I really appreciate you being available and making yourself available for others. And we'll put all this stuff on the show notes too. So we've done our hour. I really appreciate you sharing the story. God, I'm an emotional wreck a little bit too, hearing it, to be honest with you. But I think I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about your story.
This is great. I love doing this. I love working with you, Bill. So like, count me in. I'm going to share it. I'm here. If I can give you anything, let me know. If you want to do more, you want to recommend me to other people, anything I can do, I'm here.
Okay, brilliant. All right, so this is the Ardan Labs podcast. Thank you for sharing the last hour with us, and hope to see everybody again real soon.